Let us execute an immediate, sweeping, analytical vector shift away from modern procedural networks, forensic anthropology labs, and regional tracking grids, and dive directly into the shadow-drenched, theological-heavy tracking matrices of ancient Mesopotamian demonic entities, weaponized spiritual warfare, and the deeply fracturing psychological breakdown of a secular family unit in Georgetown. We are crossing the threshold directly into the hyper-monitored metaphysical parameters of an absolute literary monument with The Exorcist, the exceptional, pulse-pounding, and timeless structural pillar anchoring the global history of psychological horror and theological terror, engineered by the absolute undisputed sovereign of razor-sharp theological tension, existential dread, and high-velocity spiritual pacing, William Peter Blatty. This high-stakes narrative tracking sequence delivers an exceptional look at an operational crossroads where a desperate, fiercely protective mother asset, a deeply conflicted, guilt-ridden Jesuit psychiatrist protector, and an ancient, malicious predatory force targeting a child's personal sovereignty collide at terminal velocity. Let us map the strategic narrative grid. If you are an elite enthusiast of high-octane, slow-burn psychological horror, where an endangered, hyper-observant maternal protagonist must navigate an absolute maze of clinical medical skepticism, institutional failure, and a deadly ring of supernatural gaslighting while running a blind survival loop inside a completely compromised domestic ecosystem, where an analytical clerical mind uses deep theological discernment, calculated psychiatric boundaries, and absolute faith stamina to outmaneuver an ancient malicious entity network, and where the author utilizes an incandescent, innocent child becomes the vessel for an ancient demonic scourge diagnostic routine to test humanity's structural limits, this book is engineered to lock you in. Blatty completely dominates the science meets the inexplicable abyss dynamic, capturing the heart-racing intellectual momentum, suffocating spiritual paranoia, and heavy deductive depth popularized by genre vargs like Stephen King, Ira Levin, Clive Barker, and Peter Straub, while treating realistic psychological assessment protocols, complex spiritual alignment arcs, and protective high-density clerical tradecraft grids with absolute technical mastery. The narrative tracking grid zeroes in on the highly volatile, calculation-heavy baseline of our central domestic sector in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., operating under a severe, calculation-heavy handicap of massive medical system failure, sudden behavioral degradation, and a hyper-visible targeting profile by an invisible, ancient adversary. Behind the rigorous clinical testing footprints and tense psychiatric ledger logs lies an intricate matrix of hidden spiritual allegiances, deeply buried historical trauma, and sharp, high-stakes tactical maneuvers. Father Damien Karras's collective defense mechanisms are locked down tight behind a lifetime of intellectual shielding and the dark legacy of his fading faith, his entire analytical focus strictly consumed by monitoring sudden threat vectors from his own psychological despair, parsing complex behavioral shifts from his powerful ancient clerical allies, and shielding a vulnerable child's autonomy node from being entirely wiped out by a ruthless demonic offensive. The spark ignites when an unexpected high-frequency structural anomaly breaches the active household scanning perimeter. Young Regan McNeil begins exhibiting strange somatic mutations, localized levitation events, and multilingual vocal outputs that instantly cross-reference with ancient Near Eastern occult profiles. As the demon's possession phases enter an increasingly lethal terminal tier, a series of suspicious medical intervention failures, targeted desecrations of local sacred structures, and calculation-heavy psychological ambushes threaten to permanently eliminate Karras from the active investigator register. The official diagnostic metrics of the ecclesiastical tracking centers flash white-hot when his defensive maneuvers and raw theological breakthroughs reveal that this modern supernatural alignment is radically, impossibly altering the valley's historical balance between light and darkness. The standard boundaries of routine medical science and peaceful domestic compliance protocols crumble, and our central protagonists run completely out of standard clinical escape vectors. They are thrust directly into an active, invisible war across the household, where deceptive ancient entities, highly manipulative psychological illusions, and a calculation-heavy infernal vanguard launch aggressive countermeasures to permanently suppress their survival data stream. The tactical parameters instantly explode as their historical and survival warfare turns completely active, transforming the exclusive suburban residence, dark medical testing rooms, and the chilling ice-cold bedroom laboratory into a volatile psychological pressure cooker and a physical battle zone.
Our protective veteran clerical asset, Father Lancaster Marin, is forced to deploy his massive intuitive tradecraft, environmental mapping skills, and raw spiritual stamina to repair the perimeter and confront the entity before the next systemic possession phase permanently deletes the child's host metrics. When deceptive psychological red herrings, corrupted sensory feedback loops, and calculation-heavy physical manifestations launch aggressive plays to delete her path, their survival instincts engage their final deployment tracks. Every midnight ritual recitation, every silent choice to stand off against an arrogant, mocking cosmic adversary behind standard spiritual barriers, and every intense moment of channeling raw, unyielding faith mechanics chips away at their reliance on original peaceful rules. What follows is an exceptional, high-stakes war of perspective, tactical position, and raw human grit. We watch the secular world's deceptive perimeters completely unwrapped as Blatty reveals that the true victory requires more than just surviving an initial setup or managing a medical diagnostic file. It demands an absolute, uncompromising defense of individual dignity, personal soul sovereignty, and systemic survival against a cold, calculating machine of ancient infernal hierarchy. While our central characters smooth over each other's psychological and defensive blind spots with devastating analytical force, creating a fiercely protective web of absolute loyalty around their final stand, a brutal series of close-quarters tactical confrontations and high-stakes theological breakthroughs shifts the clock into its terminal phase, proving that historical metaphysical hazards have tracked them to their final outpost. To survive the impending locked grid trap and permanently secure the child's sanctuary, our resilient protectors must unleash an absolute, unyielding defense of their final boundary lines. It is a dark supernatural procedural, theological suspense, existential horror drama, high-velocity psychological noir masterpiece that treats deep relational logistics and intense structural friction with elite precision. The tension here burns with a sharp, calculation-heavy intensity. We are talking about that high-frequency, one-whispered holy phrase triggers a fatal bedroom showdown energy, where a sudden pause during an active ritual tactical briefing, an unexpected shift in an adversary's protective physical posture during a high-stakes psychological confrontation, or a heavy, possessive realization that an elite tactical protector has completely mapped your personal coordinates, carries massive structural weight. Blatty writes with an exceptionally fresh, vivid, and beautifully blunt voice, capturing the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of a private rectory before a major ritual engagement, and the distinct, subtle scent of polished wood, cold sweat, holy water, sulfur, freezing air, and pure, unadulterated terror. What truly elevates this terrifying classic into elite territory is the author's unmatched ability to balance complex, high-stakes psychological dynamics and genuine theological power tradecraft alongside a breathtaking narrative pace and deep emotional hooks. Our protagonists don't rely on unbelievable, superficial Hollywood superhero action tropes. Their immense situational intelligence, strategic patience, and profound survival instincts match the complexity of the chaotic spiritual and clinical underworld they dominate step for step, making their choices to risk everything feel profoundly authentic and deeply gripping. The pacing moves with calculated momentum, tracking intense conversational standoffs and breathtaking metaphysical breakthroughs before ratcheting up to an absolute jaw-dropping conclusion that delivers total, hard-earned advancement to their horizon. The Exorcist is the definitive pro-level upgrade your high-stakes classic horror and intense psychological suspense library demands right now. It is elegant, immensely fast-paced, and utterly unputdownable. It proves that when your entire sanctuary is targeted by a cold, calculating supernatural monster, the most revolutionary play you can execute is to lock your perimeters, trust your elite ancient training, and fight like hell alongside your network to rewrite the data. So secure your personal reading sanctuary, review your emotional defensive perimeters, open your Kindle, and prepare to track the fleet.